I used to think that working hard was enough, that someone somewhere would notice my contributions and reward them. But after 20 years in corporate leadership and coaching hundreds of professionals through career transitions, I've learned something uncomfortable. The game of work is not fair, but it is predictable. In fact, the people who rise the fastest aren't necessarily the hardest workers. They're the people who understand 7 unwritten rules that everyone else is completely blind to. So in this video, I'm going to reveal the 7 unfair rules of work that determine who gets promoted and who gets passed over, so that you can finally understand how the game is really played and you can position yourself to win at the senior level. You see, most people think that great performance will automatically lead to their promotion, when actually it's understanding how the organization really works that separates those who rise from those who plateau. For me, back in 2014, I thought I was on track to make partner at KPMG. I had some really good, strong client relationships. I was getting great financial results, and I was working around the clock on some of the firm's biggest insurance accounts. So by all the official measures, I was ready. But during the partner selection process, there was this breakfast meeting where each of us had to attend and present ourselves to the leadership team, most of whom I didn't actually know. And so I was a bit nervous. But I'd done my homework, and I thought I'd made a strong case by highlighting the success and the profitability of the insurance part of the business relative to other areas like banking. And what I didn't realize at the time was how that would actually land, because in trying to champion my own area, I'd unintentionally undermined other people in the room, senior leaders who led the larger parts of the business. I left thinking that, done pretty well. But shortly after, I found out that I was no longer in the process that year. I was frustrated, I was confused, disappointed, obviously, because I thought I'd done everything right, at least according to the rule book that I thought existed. But then I realized that it wasn't enough to have my boss's support or strong client numbers, because at senior levels, it's not just what you deliver, it's who you have influence and credibility with across the organization. And that moment changed everything for me. I realized that I needed to be as intentional about relationships as I was about the results that I was getting. So I started building connections outside of my immediate business unit with leaders who didn't already know me. And I was much more thoughtful about how I came across in bigger meetings where perceptions mattered just as much as the data or the information. And a year later, I was promoted to partner. Same work ethic, same results, but a completely different understanding of how the game was really played. And that's when I learned one of the most important lessons of my career, which is that hard work gets you noticed early on, but it's emotional intelligence, relationships, and strategic awareness which get you to the top. So I'm going to share the 7 unfair rules that determine who gets promoted to senior levels and who gets passed over, irrespective of their talent or how hard they're actually working. Most people struggle with getting ahead because they're playing by the official rules in the employee handbook, when the real game is played by an entirely different set of unwritten codes. And these rules don't live in any company handbook, but mastering them is how you move from being a high performer to being a leader. The first rule is that your visibility is as important as your performance. So most people think that their work is going to speak for itself, and that if they just keep their head down and deliver great results, someone's going to notice and reward them. But unfortunately these days, great work doesn't speak for itself. You've got to make yourself visible. At senior levels, perception drives decisions. And if decision makers don't see your contributions, you don't exist in their minds when opportunities arise. Early on in my career, I was focused on doing excellent work in the background, when others were presenting our team's findings to partners, sending regular updates to senior stakeholders, and making sure that the right people knew about their wins. They weren't necessarily better at the work, but they were definitely better at making sure that people knew about their work. So here are some ways that you can do this. Start sending brief weekly or bi-weekly updates to your boss and other relevant stakeholders, highlighting your key accomplishments, the impact that you've had, and the progress that you're making. Not lots of detail, nobody wants to read a long email, just 3 to 5 bullet points showing what you've delivered. You could also volunteer to present your work in meetings rather than letting others speak for you, because you want to link the impact of the work that you've done with you, so that the people who make promotion decisions know that it was you. The reason this works is that senior leaders make decisions based on what they know. And if they don't hear about your contributions directly, you're relying on others to champion you, which rarely happens consistently. But here's what you must not do. Don't confuse visibility with self-promotion, or bragging. Frame your updates around the business impact and the team's results, not just personal achievement. So say things like, our team delivered X, or, we had this result that drove this particular outcome, rather than saying things like, I personally achieved X. The goal here is strategic visibility, not looking like you're trying too hard. So you can think of visibility like a lighthouse. Your great work is the light, it's valuable, it's powerful, but without the tower broadcasting it across the water, ships will never see it. So you need both the quality work and the mechanism to make it visible to the right people. Rule number 2 is to get a sponsor, not a mentor. Most people think that mentors and sponsors are the same thing, that good advice is enough to accelerate your career. But the difference is that mentors talk about you with you, whereas sponsors advocate for you when you're not in the room. And that's where senior decisions are made. After missing partner back in 2014, I realized that whilst I did have a couple of senior mentors and a sponsor in my part of the business, I didn't actually have a sponsor who was on the leadership team. So I took it upon myself to build a relationship with one of the senior partners who seemed like they were more interested in my progress. And he didn't just give me guidance, he made sure that my name came up in key discussions and vouched for me when it mattered. And whilst I obviously put in a lot of hard work to get myself promoted, I'm convinced that his support made a huge difference. So here's exactly how to do this for yourself. Identify 1 or 2 senior leaders who already respect your work and, importantly, who would benefit from your success. So look for people who are influential in rooms you're not in and invest in those relationships. Not with flattery, but by making their priorities easier for them to achieve. And don't make this common mistake. Don't confuse sponsorship with just simple networking or, even worse, people-pleasing. Sponsors only back you because you either add value to them or they can see the value that you're going to add to the business when you're in a more senior role, not just because you're nice to have around. Rule number 3 is that perception is reality. Most people think that senior people will just see the intent behind what they do, but the meaning of your communication is the response that you get, regardless of your intention. That partner selection breakfast that I mentioned taught me this the hard way. I thought I was coming across as ambitious and data-driven, setting out my case, but others thought I was both defensive for my part of the business and attacking their part of the business. I didn't realize how I thought I was coming across wasn't how others were actually seeing me. So from that moment, I started being much more self-aware, thinking much more specifically about whether something could land with others which was different to how I was intending it to land. So here's exactly how to do this for yourself. Ask 3 colleagues, if you had to describe how I come across to senior leaders, what would you say? Just listen to what they have to say. Don't correct them, don't provide excuses or reasons, just listen. And then decide whether that perception aligns with your intent. This works because at senior levels, your reputation moves fast because people much prefer to talk about other people than the work that those people have actually done. So the perception of you can shape your opportunities ahead of your actual performance. But make sure you don't make this common mistake. Don't try to artificially manipulate the perception that other people have of you. You can only refine it. It has to be based on your authenticity and there has to be substance behind it. So rule number 4 is to align with key stakeholders, not just your boss. So most people think that as long as their direct boss likes them, they're safe. But the reality is, at senior levels, your fate is decided by people who don't work directly with you. After my own setback, I realized that I'd spent years building loyalty upward, but not really outward. And the leaders who ultimately decided my promotion barely knew me. So I started being more intentional. I was reaching out to partners in the wider financial services part of the business outside of my own area of insurance. And over time, I built a broader base of support. And for you to do this, you need to understand your company's real power structure. So once you know this, you can then identify a few people whose opinions are really going to influence your next promotion, even if they don't sign your performance review. The trick here is to start to build small, authentic connections with them now that are going to benefit you later on. And this works because if you're up for promotion, people will expect your immediate boss to support you. That's kind of a given. So it's way more powerful when other senior people who you don't directly work for also support you. Okay, so rule number 5 is you've got to do more than others. Yes, unfortunately, you've got to put the work in, but you can do it strategically. So at senior levels, meeting expectations is your baseline. That's a given. So to stand out, you've got to demonstrate capabilities and impact beyond your role. But you want to do this in a way that's targeted and visible. So here you want to be strategic about other things that you're going to get involved with. Choose opportunities that are both a bit outside of your comfort zone and that are going to help you build relationships with some of the influential people that I've just talked about. This works because it demonstrates that you're not only capable and visible, but also that you're keen, you're enthusiastic. It signals that you're ready for the next level. But make sure you don't become the person who just says yes to everything. You want to focus on visible, high-impact contributions that are seen by the right people. Rule 6 is to solve problems before they arise. Most people think that firefighting and solving problems proves that they're competent and can save the day. But the reality is that the best leaders are the ones who are smart enough to plan ahead to prevent the fires in the first place. I was guilty of the former. So I used to pride myself on fixing issues when I was under pressure. I was the one who could sort things out, and I kind of liked being the hero. But it made my workload really unsustainable. And you don't actually get any thanks for just putting things back to how they should have been in the first place. And if I'm honest with myself, a lot of those fires arose because I hadn't planned properly. So here's exactly what to do instead. Before every project or every quarter, list the top 3 things that could go wrong with people, clients, deadlines. And this is actually easier than you think, as you're normally going to have a pretty good idea of what the weak points are in anything that you're doing. And then you can preemptively address them. I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss, and he refers to this as a pre-mortem, which is where you're not looking at what went wrong after the event. You're proactively identifying the things that could go wrong before they actually do. And this works because it's normally way easier to stop a bad thing from happening than it is to pick up the pieces after it's happened. And it normally means that the quality of your output is higher, costs are lower, and client relationships are better. So if you can demonstrate that you do this, it signals your maturity as a leader. And don't make the mistake of over-engineering all of the plans here. Just focus on a few key risks that genuinely move the needle. Okay, the final rule, rule 7, and that is that being discreet makes people trust you. As you get more senior, you're going to be trusted with more sensitive information. And some people think that sharing that information demonstrates their seniority or their importance, or it kind of just makes them feel good. But the truth is that trust at senior levels is built through what you don't say, even though it may be tempting. In my previous role, I saw people lose credibility overnight by gossiping about sensitive issues or sharing private feedback, whereas the leaders who everyone trusted were those who handled sensitive information with care. They only shared it with those who needed to know. And when you see someone operate in that way, it gives you a huge amount of trust that you can confide in them, when necessary, knowing that they will also be discreet with your information. So here's how to do this for yourself. You'll know when confidential or sensitive information has been shared with you, so treat it as such. Don't gossip, and also speak well of others when they're not in the room. Nothing says more about your standards than when you stand up for someone who's not there. This works because discretion builds psychological safety, and once people know that you won't misuse information, they'll start including you in more of the conversations that matter. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, these rules feel a bit manipulative. Why should I have to play political games? And I get it, right? I felt the same way early on in my career. But here's what I learned. These rules aren't about being inauthentic or manipulative. They're about understanding how decisions actually get made in most companies and positioning yourself accordingly. So you can follow these principles with complete integrity. It's about strategic communication, not deception. When I finally embraced that distinction, when I realized that I could be visible and authentic, I could have sponsors and maintain my values, and that I could align with senior stakeholders and stay true to myself, that's when everything changed. I went from being frustrated and passed over to making partner at KPMG. Not because I compromised who I was, but because I finally understood how the game was really played. So if you want to accelerate your career at the senior level and finally understand why some people rise while others stay stuck, start by mastering these 7 unwritten rules of work I've just shared with you. And if you want some help making your next move, check out Atomic Ambition in the link in the description below. But understanding these rules won't create the breakthrough you're looking for unless you can get crystal clear on what you actually want your career to become in the first place. So watch this video next, where I show you my exact framework for gaining complete clarity about your next career chapter. Because even with perfect political savvy, if you're unclear about where you're heading, you'll just climb the ladder faster towards the wrong destination.